And welcome to Add It to the List, a podcast where we binge watch the first season of an anime and then talk about whether it should go on your watch list. I'm Jack.
Hi, I'm Forrest.
A little bit of background on us. So we've been friends for going on a bit too long, some might say. We met up in college, and just through the magic of being nerdy, early 20-some-odd boys, we became buddies.
Yeah. How long has it been? Like 7 years?
7, give or take. Like 6.5 to a full 8 at this point.
Yeah. But we're both into anime, and Jack has probably been into anime much longer than I have. What was your first anime, Jack?
My first anime was I cannot remember the name of it, but it was on Toonami, as I think most of us Americans' first anime were. It was a show about giant robots that did like loop-de-loop NASCAR racing, but they also had like a fight to the death. You could either win by killing people or you could win by getting to the end first. And it was really cool, and I have no idea what it was. There were some 3D animated bits that I'm sure aged poorly. That's the first anime that I can remember, only because it came on earlier than Dragon Ball at the time. And then like the first anime that I was really like waiting up for to watch was Dragon Ball GT. I will defend Grand Tour. It's not great, but it's not bad.
Yeah. And then my first anime series was Attack on Titan. But I watched Ghibli films growing up, and then I eventually got into Dragon Ball, and then the rest is history.
A lot of Dragon Ball based history. I suppose I should say the series that really got me back into anime and like watching it consistently was Gurren Lagann, because it's so big and dumb.
It is really good.
I love it. It's stupid, but I love it.
I mean, I got so hype at the end of that series. I like jumped out of my chair.
You gotta pop, dude. It's so good. A brief overview about this show is we'll give a little bit of an overview about an anime that we have both watched separately over the course of the last week, and then talk about it. Somewhere towards the middle, maybe 3/4 in, we're going to get a little bit deeper, a little bit more spoilery. But we're spoilers the entire time through for this week's episode, 2010's Angel Beats. Also for this week, trigger warnings for violence, self-harm, and the occasional bit of child neglect. So Forrest, what did you know about Angel Beats going into it?
I'd actually been suggested Angel Beats in high school, and I just kind of didn't watch it for whatever reason. Same. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of anime, honestly, but because a lot of people like a lot of stuff, and I'm like, yeah, maybe someday I'll watch that. So yeah, I've heard of it, literally knew nothing about it. It was pretty much 100% blind. What about you?
I knew nothing about it until your partner suggested that we do it for this show. Once I started watching it, it looked familiar in much the same way that a lot of school uniform-based anime look familiar.
Yeah, I kind of did not like the art style.
I conversely think the art style held up pretty well, considering how it's, at this point, 12 years old.
Yeah, I guess it was just very generic to me.
Yes, it's very much an anime-looking anime. A brief overview of Angel Beats is, according to Google Overview, in a realm within the afterlife, a band of teens fight to keep from being taken to the next level. And that's really dramatic, but very much you understand what the show is from that point. It's some sort of purgatory waiting room thing that just so happens to be structured like a high school, because why wouldn't it be? And for what it's worth, everybody there is roughly high school age when they died. Yeah, we find out over the course of a few episodes that people get quote-unquote obliterated. They either do that when they resolve some unfulfilled backstory-related event, or if they just spend enough time going to school being a regular dude. There are other school children there that aren't main character kuns, but they are like weird robot, not robot constructs of this universe. In episode 1, we are introduced to main character kun. I forget his name. I'm going to forget everybody's name apart from TK because I love him and his name is said a bunch.
I mean, TK was really good. Otanashi is the name of the main character. Yuzuru Otanashi.
We open on Otanashi waking up on the ground and being talked to by a very generic-looking anime girl with a gun. And her gun's trained on another generic anime girl who does not have a gun. These are main character kun 2 and 3.
Yuri Nakamura, and then Angel is what they call her, the one without the gun.
Yeah.
She's basically Rei Ayanami from that one anime. If you know who Rei Ayanami is, you probably know what anime.
You know, that's pretty fair. A pretty serviceable first episode. We get introduced to the premise, and that is there are a handful of people who are there who aren't what they call in character NPCs. Those are those constructs, those other students that don't seem to meaningfully change or develop. And then there are these other people who are in often differently named Battlefront. There's a running joke about trying to establish the name of it. I think at the end they settle on the Afterlife Battlefront.
Yeah, was that even like determined? Did they just start calling it Afterlife Battlefront? I didn't remember them deciding on that name.
I think they just gave up after a certain point.
Oh, okay.
What they're doing is under the leadership of main character kun with a gun, Yuri. They are fighting against Angel because the only thing that they know objectively is that when other people who are not NPCs hang around Angel enough, they get obliterated, which is what the show calls what we find out is moving on to whatever there is next.
Yeah, well, they specifically talk about how it's reincarnation, kind of in like a Buddhist sense, I felt like at the beginning.
Yeah.
But then I feel like that just is not even touched on again after that fact.
They do a weird thing in the beginning where they talk about how they know for a fact that a variety of sea creatures have souls in addition to humans. Like there's like a sea cucumber running joke for a couple episodes, or like a sea flea. It's serviceable. The first handful of episodes, we really get to be introduced to everybody. The long and the short of it, to avoid major spoilers, we'll get into major spoilers later, is the Battlefront is fighting Angel because they think she is an angel for whatever god is real and created this afterlife. And they are fighting against that because they don't know what's next and they don't want to disappear forever. And some of them have some baggage with God. We find out that they all have some baggage with their previous life, and that's kind of why they're here.
Yeah, I mean, that I would say is the main conflict of the series, because they all decide that there's something that they don't decide, but they all have lingering regrets basically, and it's kind of a story about coming to terms with the life that you lived.
Yeah, there's a very weird discrepancy in what constitutes a lingering regret, though.
Well, yeah.
For example, main character's best friend boy, who I'm going to refer to as Best Friend Kun.
I'll look up his name just a second.
He is, while Forrest is doing that, he's very much your standard run-of-the-mill, oh, hey, you're new here, let's be best friend characters.
Hideki
Hinata. Hinata, for whatever reason, is just like, yeah, let's be best friends. And it's worth stopping here.
I was going to say there's some really weird gay jokes that just kind of don't land that well.
Yeah.
Because this is a 2010s anime, and they clearly thought that was funny.
We get a decent payoff in the last episode for it. but it's not enough to justify how much it happens in the show. I was actually thinking about this at work today. I'm not sure if it really is a gay joke for the sake of being a joke about gay men, or if it's in the way that a lot of early 2010s anime were like trying to be clever and like go against archetype. I wonder if it was the show's way of going, oh yeah, the best friend in anime is the male equivalent of, and they were roommates.
Yeah.
You know? Maybe there's a little bit of that towards the end. I get the feeling like that's what it was set up for. Don't know for certain. I might be giving it too much credit.
Well, I guess I felt like it was more so the kind of like they're not comfortable with their sexuality kind of joke. You know, like one of them does something kind and then the other one's like, do you lean that way? And he's like, no.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, you don't have to be so adamant about it. Who would care if you were?
Like it is very much a thing that I think was played for jokes, and that's bad. It is, however, the most high school boy piece of writing in this entire show.
Oh, yeah.
Is two boys being kind to each other and then going gay. It's very much a high schooler's reaction to it. Again, it might be giving too much credit to the show. Yeah, especially the first handful of times that it shows up, it very much just feels like an offhanded gay joke. Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like we can probably move past that.
But yeah, so best friend boy, his unsolved business is he dropped a ball in a baseball game that had a lot of stakes writing on it. Which is one thing if that's like the level that we're playing at, but other people are in this like purgatory for things like being paralyzed as a kid and never being able to engage in normal young adult life and wanting to experience that life.
Or like all of their siblings got killed. Well, yeah, all of their siblings got killed right in front of them. And that's a true lingering regret that they weren't there for them and that it just happened right in front of them.
Yeah, and so on the scale of, oh, I messed up a baseball game, which feels huge.
My trauma is I didn't catch a ball.
Right? And that feels huge in the moment when you're 16 compared to this actual legitimate I was 12 and people killed my siblings and I couldn't help them. That's a pretty big jump. And we only find out like 4 or 5 people's reasons for being there. 2 of them are very dark and very real reasons why somebody who died young would have regrets in life. One of them is baseball, and one of them is rooted in child neglect. And so, yeah, we have a bit of a disparity or a discrepancy in what matters. And that's weird, and it doesn't get addressed because that's not the point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess on that topic, should we go into like what we did and didn't like about the character writing?
Yeah. Do you have something that you were thinking about in particular?
I mean, I just kind of felt like a lot of the characters were kind of one note, I guess. Like none of the characters. Well, I mean, I guess not none of them, but like the only characters that really had like an arc of like significant growth, I guess, would be like Yuri and maybe Angel. Because I mean, even if you feel like the main character, like you eventually learn his goal or like what he wants to achieve and what he was wanting to achieve when he was alive, but I felt like him kind of realizing that was just his arc, because then it's like kind of about him wanting to take care of the people around him. Yeah,
so it's worth saying that we can't really talk about the characters until we talk about one major plot point, which is plot point. Angel isn't an angel. Angel says this in episode 1, but we don't have the context to believe or disbelieve her. She's just another person who's there for reasons.
Well, and I mean, everyone was kind of like giving you that information or like that contradictory information. Like all of the other characters were like, we have to fight Angel at all times. She's trying to kill us. And that's all the information you're really given. And when most of the characters give you that information, and then only one character gives you the contradictory information, which
And
are you going to believe? Yeah.
Yeah. Angel's really just sort of there for a lot of the show. She's one of those murder lollies that just like are very passive, just sort of going along with things. And she is there trying to keep the Battlefront in a position where they're living normal student lives, because that's how people get obliterated / move on. The Battlefront don't know what that means or why at that time, so they've spent who knows how long fighting her. So that's like the only real spoiler that you need to know for for character discussion, except for everybody's background. That's fair game right now. In general, there are, kind of like Forrest was saying, about 3 characters who matter. Main character boy, main character girl, and Angel. And that's unfortunate, because main character boy is very interesting at first. I like main character boy. He has amnesia for like the first 5 episodes. Very cool. And you honestly forget about it a lot of the time, because the first few episodes are him just getting used to what the Battlefront does and learning the ropes of this world. And he's going along with it, and he's helpful, and he's just sort of there to be a good dude. And that's cool. We don't need to know about him, because what we're learning is how things work. And I honestly forgot that he had amnesia a couple of times throughout the series.
I didn't think it was really like that important until things started to get serious. Which, I mean, like, that brings up a whole nother thing about like tonal dissonance.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
But I mean, and like whether or not that was done well, but we'll get into that. But I mean, like, what was I saying?
His amnesia wasn't important.
Yeah, his amnesia wasn't important until like we learned his actual like backstory, basically. Mm-hmm. Because, the first episodes are just to get you kind of involved, get you interested in the characters, give him like he gets like one moment with Yuri where you learn her backstory, because she's kind of the first person you learn about, and she's honestly not more important, but I mean, she is the main character girl as well, so we learn a lot about her. And his amnesia just kind of doesn't matter for the most part.
In the grand scheme of shows that have a main character boy and main character girl, this is one of those where main character boy is main character, but main character girl is the one who gets the development. She's the one who really has her arc. Because out of everybody, so she is the one who had that backstory of my siblings were murdered that we were talking about earlier. So she has a lot of aggression towards the concept of God, because what fair God would do that? Fair enough, Yuri. If I died pretty shortly after that, I too would be conflicted. So she's like really the one around whom the Battlefront sprouted. She's the one who's really leading the resistance as it is. I think she has a very fun character development. She doesn't... People change, but not by much. They have big revelations, and they have revelations enough to move on, but they don't change as characters, not really. In fact, some characters get worse over time.
Like who?
They don't get worse as people, but they get worse as characters. Pretty much every supporting character in the first couple of times that you meet them are like pretty interesting, and they're kids who have a quirk. And then, not My Hero Acca, capital Q quirk, but they have some like, oh, I'm this boy. I am a high schooler, but I'm aggressive and I'm using an axe while everybody else is using guns.
They basically just all have a singular trait. Yeah. They're just like, here's this character and here's their trait. And
we have nervous boy, we have nerdy boy, we have boy who's in the sword club, right? Like, we have those characters, but the first time that we meet them, because they're two human beings meeting, they talk about things that aren't directly related to the one thing that we know about them. Like, everybody's like a more well-rounded person the first couple of times that you are introduced to them, but then as it sort of becomes a more of like an ensemble cast, they don't have the time to be interesting characters and instead just are there to say their token phrase. A really bad instance of this is Yui, weird lolly girl. The Boulder is conflicted about lolly girl because on the one hand, I really thought I'd hate her, and then she grew on me over the course of the first episode, and then the next episode, it's like, okay, no, never mind. She was someone who I dislike.
I didn't feel like her character was that bad. I mean, like, I felt like
I just
her
don't like
character
lolly
was...
characters.
I mean, that's totally fair. But, I mean, I thought some of the comedic aspects of her character landed fairly well.
Yeah,
But, I mean, like, that's the thing is, like, this show is kind of a comedy. There wasn't... I guess there didn't need to be that much character development because a lot of your emotional stakes are these people coming to terms. And, like, I guess that is kind of the development of each character. But you also just don't get to see that for, like, half of them because they run out of time, I'm assuming, or they just didn't feel like writing that aspect of the story.
Yeah, it's worth noting that, maybe they're all flushed out in, say, the manga or the visual novel that this anime was based off of, or maybe the visual novel came later. Don't at me.
I don't even know if this was based on anything.
I saw while I was looking up the Google overview that this has both a manga and a visual novel. That's why I know those things. But yeah, like, it kind of is trying to have its cake and eat it too by being a very silly, these are some guns and we're shooting at this lolly who's deflecting it with arm swords. But we're also like, hey, this is some pretty messed up stuff that happens to these characters, and they're dealing with some repressed emotions. Like, there's some real hints of some very deep characterization with some very deep emotional development that just doesn't happen on screen. And it's very unfortunate. I feel like I ended up, and I guess this is a bit more of like an overarching, this is what Jack thought about the show. I ended up liking this show more than I thought I would. There are bits that I do not like, but overall this show, in how it presents itself and what it's trying to do, has a lot of personality. The humor lands for me more than a lot of comedy anime does.
Yeah, that's definitely the same for me. I felt like I laughed out loud pretty frequently, especially in the beginning. But.
Yeah, one of my favorite jokes in any anime is that in episode 2, the second time that we're introduced to I'm violent, headstrong boy who uses an axe, he's like trying to square up against main character Kun in a trapped hallway. He goes to square up against main character Kun, and then main character Kun goes, dude, I don't care. You don't have to like me. You don't have to be my friend. You don't have to accept me. And Axe Boy goes, no, we're doing this. And he starts walking towards him, and a big old log trap comes swinging and just smacks him. And he's airborne. And as he is airborne, the screen slows, and we hear like 2 seconds of the very like mournful, very contemplative end outro song as he's flying.
Oh, yeah. And
then we snap back to speed. That is a fantastic comedy sequence. Yeah. It was so good.
I mean, just that trap that even hit the main character at one point. That was pretty funny because it just kind of came out of nowhere and then he just went flying out the window. But like, I guess we didn't even talk about how these characters can't actually die because they're basically in the afterlife.
Yeah, they're in purgatory. Whenever they can be mortally wounded and it hurts. They talk in the first couple of episodes about how it hurts. They don't really do anything about that, but they feel pain. But they'll wake up sooner or later.
Yeah, it's basically like they just have a regeneration. But they can't actually die from anything until they get out of this world, I guess.
Yeah. But yeah, so like there's some like very real comedy moments. The lolly that I was talking about, how I was conflicted about earlier, she's like the butt of some very good slapstick humor. They're like foot snowboarding down this like mountainside, and they're like talking about the next battle, and she just like full speed claps into like a tree or something, and they're like, oh no, she must have got by Angel.
Oh
It's like,
yeah,
no, she just died.
Yeah.
She just died by going full speed into a tree.
Well, I mean, they also, her and Hinata, I think is his name, have a lot of really stupid interactions where they get really angry at each other all of a sudden.
Yeah,
which I mean, like, was funny, but it just kind of kept happening, and I'm like, you can't just keep reusing this joke.
Yeah, they settle into an older brother, younger sister dynamic for most of it, which makes their last scene weird, and we'll talk about that once we reach the all spoilers are off type section of the show.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, Forrest.
Well,
the boulder is conflicted. They settle into like this older brother, younger sister, like annoying each other dynamic, and then they throw it out the window. But they settle into it, and then that works for them. But she is another character who, the first episode that you meet her, she's like a fangirl for this like school band that's comprised of main characters. And then she becomes the lead singer because the singer of the girl band, she's around for 2 episodes. She is there to show you that being obliterated means that you have come to terms with your past.
Yeah, I liked her character. I thought, even though she was around for a short period of time, she had a cool concept. And
oh yeah, I love her.
I thought the music was really good.
She's the child neglect case that I mentioned earlier with, the trigger warning. She has a very fun personality, and her story's very concise, and it's told well. The pacing is very good. She found peace in music, and she died before she was able to share that peace with other people. Well, episode 2, she gets to live out that experience through convoluted plot reasons, and in a very well shot, well composed scene, she gets obliterated. And that's how we know that that's what obliteration does. It's nice. But anyway, because she's not there to lead the main character band, UA pops up going, let me do the thing. And in that scene, she annoys me at first because she's an annoying underclassman. And then like she gets like some real personality and just like is kind of a funny character for a while. I'm like, okay, she's not so bad. And then
are we going to talk about how like that one different opening was super dope? Where like they replaced the opening with like a guitar, like a rock cover of it. And that was 1 episode, and I was like, that's a decent amount of effort. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, so what Forrest is talking about is in the episode, the episode where Yui is basically going, hey, let me be the lead singer, we watch her audition with the rest of the band basically in the intro. And the credits are rolling as we're watching her play and sing the song. And it's very good. As long as we're talking about intros and outros, the outro is very well done. Like I said, it's a very contemplative track. That's solo piano, like voice over piano. And it's this silhouette or this picture of all of the characters walking and laughing together. And they all appear one by one. There are a couple of iterations of the outro, but the first one is at the end of episode 2, where former lead singer girl gets obliterated. All of a sudden, she doesn't pop into that picture. Very well done.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely some really good, just like minor attention to detail that just made it feel, I guess, like that much more care was put into it. And like, I guess on the topic of the name Angel Beats, like I felt like it didn't really matter because there were only a few characters that had anything to do with music, and it felt like it was gonna be more music oriented, but then just kind of wasn't.
Yeah, the first couple episodes very much give you the impression like, oh, this is a gun and band anime? And the band stops mattering very quickly. Also, the intro is the titular Angel playing the piano, which she never does in the show, nor do we ever get any implication that she
likes to
play music. There's a scene where, so Angel, spoiler alerts, becomes part of the crew. Main character boy's like, why are we fighting her? If she's a person like us, why are we fighting her? And he like learns her name, and she becomes part of the crew for like the second half of the anime.
Well, are we just gonna call this the point where you should just stop if you don't want to?
No, because so much of the anime happens after this moment that I don't think it's like really a spoiler. This is like an episode 5 spoiler.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, I mean,
but before we transition off of the topic of music anime, there's a moment where main character goes, I really like your name. It's very pretty. It means, and then something musical. And then he goes, my name means to string a musical instrument. Why? Why is that a scene that happens in a show that's not based around music? Like, this isn't, I can't think of the name. It's not a silent voice. This isn't that anime that popped off a couple years ago about that kid learning to love the piano again, right? Like,
oh, Your Lie in April?
Yeah, this isn't a Your Lie in April. There's a lot of like musical aesthetics to it, but that's not what this show is about.
Yeah, so anyway, I mean, that just means the title is very weird.
So before we go on, broad strokes for us, what did you think about the show?
I mean, I thought it was decent. I definitely think it had good things going for it. It was kind of emotional, or not emotionally, but just narratively or tonally, that's the word, tonally dissonant with the way that like it went from very comedic to very serious. There's like one particular 2 episodes where it just got extra serious all of a sudden, and then the next episode is just like, oh nope, it's all good, we're all funny again, we're all just laughing. And like, I don't have a problem with that ultimately, but I do think it could have just been done better. It was just too abrupt, and then it went back, and it only really did that twice, I think. But anyway, we can talk about that more, but I probably wouldn't add it to my list or to your list just because it doesn't really offer anything that's outstanding. It's a little emotional at times. Just a bunch of characters with really tragic backstories, I guess, if you're into that. But I'm not that really into that. So, yeah. Good, but not amazing.
Fair enough. I agree. It's tonally dissonant. The shifts in tone are jarring. It's trying to have its comedy and eat it too. You know, like it is trying to be this grand and moving story about character growth, but it's also trying to be a comedy anime, and it doesn't spend enough time on either. There are like corner of the screen cut-ins from Yui and some other characters to say their one joke that they repeat for a couple of episodes that just sort of take you out of the scene. It undermines other characters' characterization. In general, I think if I watched this in 2010, I would have loved it. Granted, I also would have been 12. But even like not counting that, if I had watched this in 2010 with, you know, I'm not going to say less good, like no good anime out there. There were good anime by 2010, and there were more good anime coming out. But if I had watched this as like a newer anime enjoyer, I would have loved it. But it does rely on a lot of tropes. It gets by off of just not establishing some things because this is just a thing that happens in anime type of moments. But it's also got a lot of character. Like I said earlier, like it has a lot of personality. It becomes an ensemble comedy, but all but one of the ensemble members are pretty solid. 2 of them are pointless. One of them I there are two characters that I honestly didn't know were different characters. Um, so maybe that's not a great review
Yeah,
of the show.
I think I know exactly who you're thinking about.
Lamau. But I also probably want to add it to the list unless this sort of slice of life but tearful goodbye story is your jam.
Yeah.
So all of that being said, now I don't care about spoilers.
Yeah, now we're going to talk about spoilers. So if you decide you want to watch it, but you don't want to get it spoiled, go watch it and then maybe come back later. But if you don't care, you can continue listening and you'll hear a bunch of spoilers.
Yeah. First things first, special shout out to the ensemble and the two characters that I thought were the same character. They were Buff Nerd Glasses Boy, who apparently is an idiot, but he just pushes up his glasses and like says things to try to make himself seem smart. That's his joke. Until later on, his joke is he's secretly super ripped, so he just like stops wearing his shirt after like episode 6. Fair enough. Go off, Queen.
There's that one episode where they're trying to get Angel to fail the tests, like the exams for the school. That was probably one of the funniest episodes to me. Like,
it was surprisingly
it definitely like reused a joke, but it did it in such a way that like you weren't quite expecting it. So when it just came out of nowhere and they just got shot into the ceiling, pretty much every time I laughed. And like I feel like that's a testament.
So Angel is student body president of this world school, and they think that if they can get her kicked out of the student body, then they can do things. This is also when main character boy starts going, hey, she's a person. Why are we fighting her? This is like the turning point for the series. It's like episode 5 or episode 6. But how they do that is a bunch of them ended up in the same rooms as her to take the exams. So they swap out her test really fast. But to do that, they need a distraction. And so when the distraction fails, Yuri shoots whoever was supposed to distract people with a rocket underneath their chair into the ceiling. But that same moment of slowing down and playing the tearful, mournful outro.
Yeah, when they linger on it, it made it even more funny.
That same log trap joke from earlier happens each time someone gets sent into the ceiling, and it happens 3 times in that episode. But what I really love as a like attention to detail is each time it's like 2 seconds of the outro, but it picks up where the last time left off. So the first time is like seconds 1 and 2. The second time seconds 3 and 4. The third time is seconds 5 and 6. And I think that was chef's kiss.
Well, and thinking about that episode, I think that episode is a good one because it specifically kind of builds up the tension with Angel, but then also gives the main character a chance to interact with her that's like semi-normally. And like he learns her real name, which I thought that was pretty funny because they were like, we don't even know her real name. And then he just like walks up to her and then they just start talking. And yeah, I mean like, but like I was saying, she's like the Rei Ayanami because she doesn't talk half the time. And like she's socially awkward, but because of that, she seems like robotic. And then I feel like obviously it's meant to be like, oh, but she's actually also a human. And that's like one of the things in the series that kind of is just like not necessarily hard to understand, but there's a lot of things that just aren't explained very well. And like a lot of things that like happen or are said, and you're just like, okay, I guess we just got to believe that that's a thing that can happen in this world.
Yeah.
Because like they try to explain the way that like weapons are generated, like you just have to know how it works in the real world and then you can just like generate it in this world.
You like transmutate things. So like in episode 2 we're introduced to the guild, capital G, and it's just another group of like real humans that are making weapons underground, and apparently they just take dirt and think it into weapons and ammunition.
I mean, that was a pretty funny moment when they like tried to make a giant cannon and then they were like, oh, we don't actually know how a giant cannon works, and then it just explodes on them.
That's a really solid moment, to be
But
sure.
like, yeah, I mean, we don't have to get off track to that. But like, we were talking about Angel
Yeah.
and like how we learned that Angel's also a human, and then she kind of just becomes part of the group.
So that's the point where the episode, or where the series kind of hard pivots.
Yeah.
Because the first handful of episodes is we got to fight Angel because Angel's working with God and she's got answers for who or what God is and why we are here. No, she doesn't. We figure out that she doesn't. And then they're like, all right, well, I guess we'll just goof around and try to figure out what to do. We find out that Angel, or I guess it's speculated that Angel, because what she's been doing is just being a high school student, she's going to class, she participates in clubs, she enjoys herself. Main character Kun figures out that, like, yeah, and if that's how people get obliterated, then that means whoever comes here and becomes friends with her have been obliterated. And that happened so many times that must be why she's like this. She's just there to help people pass on, and she thinks that doing that how she does this is by trying to force the battlefront into being normal kids. But she's not here to have friends, because whenever she gets close to somebody, they move on.
Yeah.
Angel doesn't say this. Angel doesn't even confirm this. We just have to assume, because that's what main character boy's deduction was.
He's like, oh my god, I figured it out, but I guess we'll never actually know if I figured it out.
Except we do. Last episode,
yeah.
we do. I hate the last scene of this anime. I don't want to jump there yet.
Yeah.
I hate the last scene.
Well, I think we should... I mean, if we're still talking about, like, the plot, I feel like we could go more in depth into, like, the later parts of the plot.
Well,
because, like...
Well, yeah. So...
Because, I mean, like, that... Well, I was
What do we hard pivot into after Angel is what I was going to talk about.
Well, is it before or after they recruit... No, it's, like, after they recruit Angel, but there's that one episode. I literally, like, wrote down what episode it was because it was the only one that I was just like, why the hell did this even happen all of a sudden? And, it is episode 6, because episode 6, just like one of those moments where the tone just dramatically shifts, and everyone, and like after Angel,
episode 6 sucks ass.
after Angel like loses the title of class president or whatever, this other guy named Naoi, I think Naoi,
yeah, something like that.
Naoi, or Naoi, he just starts trying to kill everyone.
Yeah, so he was the student
like
council vice president, who, after they successfully got Angel booted from being the student council president, took over. Well, turns out he's also a dude with independent thought. He is not an NPC. But also, apparently, he's taught himself hypnotism, which is real and exists in the afterlife.
Yeah, I mean, that was just kind of stupid.
That's something
that was
that
like
gets
their way of
hand-waved.
being like, here's his quirk. Like, literally, that's all.
His whole thing is being a good student should make you disappear. So why is he still around? We find out that he's still around because he's balancing out his good studentness by beating the crap out of NPCs and being a big old bully. I don't know why, but that's a scene that we saw because he was the bad guy for an episode, and he was a really intense bad guy. He had like real like bad guy, psychopath, sociopath energy, and then by the end of the episode he was recruited.
Well, but he didn't even get recruited at the end of the episode, because like the end of the episode is Otanashi, the main character.
Main character can.
He just hugs him and he's like, I understand no one loves you, so you have a reason. And then it's just like hard cuts.
Yeah.
And then
so
next episode happens and it's just like, oh look, he's part of the group now, and we're back to that joyful, happy humor that was in the previous episode.
So Noe's background or backstory is that he was out of a set of twins, the neglected twin. His brother was a prodigy, so his parents spent all of their effort and all of their time, including abuse, on his brother. Well, all of a sudden his brother dies, and now he gets to step into being the center of his father's attention. But then his father stops doing that because he gets sick, and he's just like, well, maybe I need to mellow the fuck out with age. Fair enough. But all of a sudden, Naue, who's learned this like very abusive form of self-worth, doesn't have that. And he died without having that. So when main character boy in that hug goes, you lived a life and your life was real, you mattered, or your life mattered to you. That sort of conversation. And in that moment, Noe is like, oh my God, somebody's recognizing my existence. Because I guess that's what his big deal was. We find that out because main character boy is stopping him from hypnotizing Yuri into moving on. Because basically he's like, hey, be happy. I'm hypnotizing you to be happy and to get past your trauma, whatever it is. Because at this point, nobody knows what it is except for the two main characters. And she's like fighting through it. She's like, this isn't real. This is nice, but this isn't real. These people are dead. This isn't how things happened. And as it looks like she's about to go off, main character boy out of nowhere hits him with the stone cold stunner. Not really. It would have been a better scene that way. Hits him with like the hug. You can't do this to her. You can't have her be obliterated on fake memories. Her past was real and there's value to it being real. And Noe goes, oh my God, someone's acknowledging me. And then the next episode, like Forrest said, he's just hanging with the crew, but he doesn't like anyone else in the crew. He likes main character boy because main character boy acknowledged him.
And he's like weirdly obsessed with him.
Yeah, it's our other weird best friend character are totally roommates, but it's a worse dynamic. And he and Hinata get like, oh no, I'm the helper, I'm the best friend.
Yeah.
And what really pisses me off is now Noe is like one of the four main characters now because he's always around, and I hate that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I don't hate the messages that like that episode was trying to put forth. Like, I don't feel like they were bad in any way. Oh no, did your microphone thing fall off?
No, we're good. Keep going.
Yeah, it kind of doesn't fit properly.
I'll just do this. It
should be fine if you just hold it. But he... God damn it, I lost my train of thought.
You don't dislike the messages, but...
Yeah, I don't dislike the messages, but it is just so incredibly jarring going from that episode to the next that I just felt like it was kind of pointless.
Yeah,
it just doesn't work the way they wanted it to.
No, not even kind of.
And so, yeah, basically, like, yeah. I mean, I guess we can move on from that episode unless you have anything else to say about that.
I think that that's a very good example of what we were saying earlier about the show being tonally jarring, is because the last scene of that episode's really dark. And then the first scene of the next episode is people hanging out and doing dumb jokes that seem really out of place, like very much like shonen, like bad stereotypical humor type jokes. And it's just like, this isn't good. These aren't a good depiction of these characters. This is weird. Also, that scene where he's like hypnotizing people, this show's weird as far as the fan service goes. A thing about Jack Michaels, that's me. I didn't say my last name at the start, so maybe that didn't make sense.
And yeah, that's a nickname of his.
That literally nobody uses. I think one manager called me it once, and now occasionally it's my screen name. A thing about Jackie Mikes is that fan service upsets me. When it is an underaged character.
Well, that's
now
fair.
They talk about how people don't age here, so we don't know how old anybody is emotionally, but they all died as teenagers or like at the oldest 17, about to take basically the SATs. We know that for a fact. That's why they're there. This show being a high school based show, I was very ready to be very about it. Well, to the show's credit, most of the time, I forget that characters are in like skirts that literally barely cover like a fifth of their thigh, because 9 times out of 10, everybody's shot from the waist up and they don't have big titties. They don't have a lot of cleavage. It's like, oh, okay, cool. They're like wearing uniforms that you would actually give to students because they're not revealing. There are occasionally like scenes where like Yuri's legs are on the table and it's like her stockings are better drawn than the rest of the scene. And it's like, all right, slow the fuck down. But for the most part, you don't notice. The scene where Noe's hypnotizing people was one where it's like, why is her shirt torn? Why is her bra out? Why are we like, oh, why are we kind of almost getting upskirts of her?
Are you talking
slumped
about
over?
Yui?
Yes.
Oh,
No, Yuri.
Oh, Yuri.
Yuri's like in that, like Yuri's battle damaged and drawing
I remember
is
that,
very stereotypical anime, like suggestive, and I don't know why, and it makes the scene worse.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like they just thought it was funny at the time, as most anime do.
In that instance, I'm not even sure if it was like a humor thing. It's just like, oh, she's been shot and injured. Well, her shirt's ruffled, which means her bra's showing now, and her...
I mean, are we talking about the same scene, like the one towards the end?
No.
Oh.
I'm talking about the scene in the rain before Noe joins the crew.
Oh, okay.
Noe's like standing over Yuri, who's slumped over. Her stockings are torn. Her skirt's torn. It's like closer, but not quite an upskirt still. And like her bra's showing. And it isn't the most egregious example of this, right? Like High School of the Dead is actually just porn. But it's still one of those things where it's like, this is not necessary. And this is one where I fully admit that this might just be me harping on it because it is a big thing of mine. Okay, so the reason why Jackie Mikes has a hard time with fan service and has a hard time with high school-based anime, which makes being an anime fan really bad and really hard, is that I have spent most of my adult life working at a shelter home for teenagers. I have seen what the reality of sexualizing teenagers look like in real life. So it's a big sticking point for me. So I'm a little bit hyper-vigilant with it. But like I was trying to say, I guess I kind of lost the plot there, is that to the show's credit, I kind of forget that they're high schoolers because it's not bad about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, yeah, there's those few moments like here and there, but I do feel like they do a pretty decent job overall of just like not going too overboard.
Yeah, to be sure. Before we say anything important, the two characters that I thought were the same character were surprisingly buff nerd Takamatsu and sword club boy Fujimaki.
Yeah.
Fujimaki towards the end has a moment where he goes, wow, I'm surprised you guys remembered me. I feel like everybody looks past me, and someone cuts him off. Which is funny, but at the same time, hey, Angel Beats, you can't make a forgettable character and then remind us that he's forgettable.
I mean, that's pretty good. I literally never even... Did he have any sort of moment? What was his thing?
Nothing.
Did he even have a quirk?
Nope, he was a sword boy. Fun fact, we don't figure out the backstory of most members of the Battlefront. We figure out the singer from the band originally. She is Best Girl. She has her character development early, and she's the one who gets obliterated to show us what obliterating is. We get hers. We get main character boy, main character girl. We don't even get Angels. And then we get Hinata's, which was the dumb baseball. We have a baseball tournament episode, and it looks like Hinata's going to be like the second person to get obliterated, but then Yui, they've already established throughout the course of the episode that like older brother little sister dynamic, and he's like been putting her in like basically noogies.
Yeah.
Throughout the episode whenever she does something disruptive.
Or like chokeholds.
Yeah, and so he's about to catch the pop fly. That's the thing that he dropped in real life, and then he started doing drugs and then died from doing drugs. That's his backstory. But right before he catches it and completes his closure, Yui just gets him. She's like, oh, you're wide open.
Well, but even the main character was like running at him like, no, I don't want you to go away. Please don't go away.
Yeah.
And that was just, I mean...
Hinata and Yui, like I said, settled into that older brother, little sister dynamic, and it gets weird at the end.
Well, I think we could probably, like...
We can jump to the end now,
I mean, we could talk about, like, how I just kind of felt like there were a lot of plot points towards the end that just kind of were weird and not like that good. Like
So-
the whole shadow thing.
So after Angel becomes part of the crew, the new villain for all of an episode is Noe. And then Noe becomes part of the crew. And so they don't have a main villain. So to have like an antagonizing force, these weird shadow monsters. Okay, so first, main character boy, after we've assembled all of the cast, has decided, you know what? We should. So he gets his memories back and he's like, this closure is nice. And turns out what he was trying to do before he died was become a doctor so he can help people, because that's what he figured out his purpose in life was. So he's like, well, I want to help these people get that closure and be obliterated. So we have an episode where he spends like the episode obliterating Yue. He's doing it in secret because he doesn't know how Yuri's going to react, because she's like, nah, bah, and he just like, it's anime, nobody talks to each other.
Yeah.
So we have that episode, but in that episode, we see in the background is like a B plot that these shadows are popping up. We don't know what they are. They're just like shadow monsters. Cool. Turns out the world as it is that they exist in was programmed by someone who went to that purgatory, and they programmed through computers that exist in the world. This is one of those things that does not make sense and is not very well set up.
Yeah, and it doesn't get explained, and it's just kind of like, you just have to accept that this is the fact.
Yeah. We find out that however many eons ago, somebody set up the NPCs, but then also set up a failsafe. Because love cannot blossom in this world, because if people start falling in love, then they're not going to move on, and the entire point of the world is to move on. Fair enough.
I thought it was the other way around. I thought if they were going to start falling in love, they do move on. And didn't he fall in love with someone and he didn't move on, though, or something like that?
So we find out it is literally the second to last episode, a character who we have never seen and does not get named, who is just sort of like acting on behalf of like the antagonistic force. Like Forrest was saying, the shadows are poorly implemented, but they are the force that drives the change that wraps up the show. Is all that they're there to do. They give us some cool fight scenes. That's it. There is this boy who is an NPC that was created by who he refers to as the programmer. The programmer was this guy who just showed up in that world and made, through, again, actual programming, the NPCs. I don't know why, but he made a failsafe in them that, like, if love showed up, that they turn into shadows and then corrupt people into NPCs. I don't know why. The programmer's story is that he showed up and then he fell in love with a girl who showed up, but the girl found her closure and moved on. So the programmer was so obsessed with her and in love with her that in order to get over it, because he couldn't move on, but while he was in love with her, he programmed the failsafe of the shadows so that if love started to happen in the world, the shadows would stop the people who are falling in love. I don't know why, because by turning them into NPCs, they don't develop, which means they also can't find closure and move on, but whatever, it doesn't need to make sense. And so he then codes himself into being an NPC to get over falling in love with this girl. Yeah. Really weird. There's some vague implications that the programmer was Otanashi, main character boy.
Like, I literally just thought about that. Yeah. Honestly, while you were talking about that.
They don't say it. Okay.
But I mean, so I feel like that's a good point to just move on to the end of the series.
The end of the series is it's very good, and then the last scene happens and it ruins it. Everybody's moving on. So Yuri calls a meeting of the Battlefront. She's like, hey, I can't tell you what to do. Main character and the two, they were roommate best friends, are helping people get obliterated to move on. You can do that if you want. We have these shadows to fight. I don't know what they are. And if they get you, you'll be an NPC and you'll be forever unable to change. So since we don't know how to stop them, you might want to go get obliterated. Every named character chooses to stay and fight to help Yuri realize her dream. all of the named characters except for Yuri, the two best friends, and Angel get obliterated after helping her realize her thing. But those 5 stick around.
Well, they get obliterated like right after the whole shadow thing gets figured out, and
Yep.
it's just like the next scene. It's just like, they're all gone now.
We get a montage of the character of not even the entire Battlefront named characters, but the ones that have spoken the most, being contemplative and just quietly making decisions. Yeah. And then they all show up to help main character help Yuri. And so I guess the implication is that they found their closure, but they were then sticking around a little bit longer to help Yuri. And then once they help Yuri, they obliterate off screen. Really unsatisfying. Really unsatisfying. Because they don't matter, quick shout outs to big strong boy who eats a bunch.
Who gets super thin because he's
there's a really weird scene where the one non-buff, non-skinny kid, he goes off and trains in the mountains / they forget to write him into 2 episodes. He fucks off into the mountains for 2 episodes.
They say that he went to the mountains.
I definitely think they added that in like later. Like, oh goodness, we haven't put in episode 9 or 10. Go back to episode 8 and say that he went to train in the mountains. Yeah. It works. But he comes back and he's been training in the mountains where there's not a lot of food. And he goes, yeah, I've been training really hard and I haven't eaten that much because I've been in the mountains. And now he's just a skinny, handsome boy. And it's like, really? The one fat kid? He wasn't even that fat, but the one fat kid is now a skinny boy? I didn't like that. As a larger gentleman, I did not like that. Well, shout out to him. I love him. He's a very sweet boy. We also see him just like actually throwing these shadow monsters, and he fights with his bare hands in this episode. I love him.
Well, and he was even super good at baseball.
Yeah, he's just he trains a bunch. He's a 5th degree black belt in Taekwondo. They were mentioning. Then when he starts punching people, they go, "Why is he punching people? If like Taekwondo's about like locks. Oh no, wait, why? No, he's a 5th degree black belt in like judo. Yeah. Why is he striking these shadows if judo's about throws?" And someone goes, "Don't question it." I think that's pretty funny.
Well, yeah, because someone's like, "That's karate."
Yeah, like that's karate. That's not Taekwondo. And they basically go, "Shh."
But then TK
dresses like everyone from 2004 who thought Vanilla Ice was cool.
He reminds me of Axl Lowe a lot from Guilty Gear.
That's fair. He is blonde white boy who's like into hip hop. He's very stereotypically that way.
And he just dances a bunch.
He dances a bunch. He's always dancing, and he does say some things in like Japanese, and he does have like some normal like sentences, but for the most part he just says random things in English. So like, I don't know, they're just messing around in episode 4 and he goes, "Don't stop dancing." That's all that he contributes to a conversation. It's not relevant. It doesn't help things. Every now and then he goes, "I kiss you," before he shoots his guns. He has a very cool moment in the final episode where, as the crew's getting together because they decided to stay to help, he has a very cool episode where he's doing like a breakdance head spin down a handrail, and he's like Hitmontop from Pokemon, just like kicking shadows into oblivion, and then he does like a gun kata, like spinny shooty thing with 2 pistols. Yeah. Very randomly badass for TK.
And then he's like, knocking on heaven's door.
Knocking on heaven's door. And then main character boy goes, "That's Bob Dylan."
Yeah.
I don't know why he decides to point that out, because it's not like he's saying that it's someone else.
Yeah.
It's just like, "Oh, that's Bob Dylan." All right, go off, I guess. I love TK. There's an episode where they go fishing and they catch this big old fish that they can't eat in time. They're doing like a cookout, and TK's chopping up some fish and just goes, "Chop, chop, chop, chop." I don't know why. I love him.
Well, I mean, he's really good. He's just the best pointless character because he's just there to be there, and it's always great when he's there.
Yeah. There's a really upsetting scene. So that's pretty much all there is to TK. It's pretty much all there is to most characters. They're either fun background characters or pointless background characters. Either way, they don't get much development. I have a note here, which is a very upsetting moment where Angel, who's a lolly, she's lolly bait. She's at least a freshman. Yeah. She's at least a freshman. This isn't at the end, but it's just a note that I found. There's a scene where she's fighting an evil clone of herself. And for whatever reason, we get like a picture of a character looking up at her in like a very traditionally dominating manner, and she says, "I'll have to punish you." That was big yikes for me.
I literally don't remember that.
Like I said, I might be a little over vigilant of it, but that was a big yikes moment for me.
I mean, it's clearly pointless, because that's probably why I don't remember it.
Yeah. Another one of my favorite TK moments is dancing in the dock. I love him. I love him so much. Yeah, we figure out that people are there because they weren't able to enjoy their youth. Is like the big, that's why. Like that's the big plot reveal. So yeah, they start obliterating people. They obliterate Yuri. About 30 minutes ago, we were going to talk about Hinata and Yui and why it was weird. So like I said, before we actually talk about like the ending, they established this older brother and annoying little sister dynamic between Hinata and Yui. Yui is the character who was paralyzed, and so she died not being able to do things that a kid and a teenager would want to do. So that's why she's a little bit more immature. That's why she's running around doing everything. So she watched a bunch of TV. So she wanted to be in a band, she wanted to play baseball, and she wanted to do a German suplex. I love that bit. As a wrestling nerd, I love that bit.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was good.
And so yeah, the episode is they knock out the first few, and then it's like a lot of like baseball stuff. And then after they do all of that, main character goes, "Oh, so was that everything that you always wanted to do?" And she goes, "No, I want to get married." And then there's this really good speech that she gives about like, yeah, as a paralyzed woman, I could never be married because no man would want me because they'd just view me as something that would get in the way. I can't cook for them. I can't clean for them. And on the one hand, it's like, ewy, want more for yourself. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, that's true today in America. I can't even imagine how it's like in a more traditionalist culture. That's a very fair thing to be hung up on. And then she's like, yeah, no guy would ever want to marry me. And then we have like this like weird moment where main character is like about to like say that I would marry you, but he's like not into it.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's not there to lie.
Yeah. I mean, that was just a whole weird moment. It is weird
that he's weird about lying about it, you know?
Yeah.
But then Hinata comes in out of nowhere and goes, "Oh, I would marry you." And we honestly have like a really sweet moment where Hinata's like, "Hey, I've met you here and you're cool, you're passionate, you're kind," and all these like blah, blah, blah things. And she's like, "Oh, but was paralyzed." And he like basically talks her through her insecurities up to and including like this fake meet cute where he crashes a baseball through her window and he meets her when he goes to apologize, and then they fall in love from there. And we see that like montage as he's describing this fake moment. And it's a cute moment, but it's weird because of the brother-sister dynamic they had earlier.
Well, yeah, because I mean, like, it just kind of comes out of nowhere, and then you're supposed to just assume, like, oh, they, like, got closer because of this dynamic, and now he's just like, yeah, I'll marry you, because I will look after you for the rest of your life if I was, like, actually alive still.
If we met when we were alive, right? And, like,
yeah.
This is sort of what I was saying earlier about, like, this show gets by assuming you've watched anime and are here for tropes.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a boy meets girl dynamic in there that's really traditional romance anime trope, but we don't see it develop. It just assumes that you know that should have happened, and then it happens. But also, we don't know if that was a lie or not to, like, help her move on. But that's how Hinata joins main character Kun in helping out. So the last scene, I hate. The last episode, everybody helped Yuri close her baggage. They stop the shadows, but that also stops all of the NPCs. It's just the world and the school and them.
Wait, but there's actually, in that last scene, you can see NPCs.
I know. It's inconsistent.
Well, yeah, exactly.
So they stop the shadows. And the only people who are left are like that core five, including Noe for no good reason. And they're like, well, how should we move on? It's like, well, we're going to do a fun little graduation ceremony because angels never experienced graduation. So they do like this cute 5-person graduation where they go through some things. It's actually a pretty good scene.
God, it's hot in here.
It is hot in here. I think it's on light. There's a very fun moment, and this is why I'm a little bit more lenient on the gay jokes, because they pay it off very well. Again, they still spend a lot of the anime making gay jokes for no goddamn good reason, so your mileage may vary on that. But at the very end, they're handing out, or like as part of that fake graduation, they're handing out fake diplomas, and the main character boy gives one to Hinata, who didn't think he would get one.
Yeah.
And they have like a bit of a touching moment. That happens, and then people are ready to move on. No Way moves on first. He basically just goes, "Hey, senpai, call me a good boy." Senpai calls him a good boy. He moves on. And then Hinata's like, "I guess I'll go next." And main character boy goes, "Hey man, I really couldn't have done this without you. You mean a lot to me." And so Hinata gets to go, "What, are you gay?" They flip that around at the last moment, and then they like have like, "All right, bro, I'll see you later," high five. And in a very cool moment, they high five, and then they cut back, and no one's in front of main character.
I mean, those were good scenes.
Yeah, those were good scenes. And then Yuri gets to have her moment of moving on. I don't really remember what her closure statement is. I think it was like, "Hey, Angel, I'm sorry that I spent so much time
her
fighting
whole
you."
thing was just like she wished she could have been friends with Angel, and like
Yeah,
they could have
that's
been
like-
just like gal pals.
That's like an ending scene. I mean, I think it's a little bit more like, "I wish I could have been a big sister to you."
No, yeah, like it was rooted in her trauma, but like that was like her whole thing.
Yeah, but like she had already moved on from her trauma with like the whole stopping the shadow thing. She like had that realization in that moment, so it's weird that was happening. And so she moves on, and then main character boy goes, "Hey Angel, can we do this outside? I want to catch some air." And this is where we run into NPCs again, although there was an implication that the NPCs are all gone. And he goes, "Hey, maybe we don't move on. Maybe you and I stay here together to help other people who show up here so that they don't get stuck fighting each other or don't get it." And she turns him down, which is very cool. I like it a lot. I like that bit a lot, that she turns him down. But what I don't like is him going, "I love you." And not like in a big brother love, like I am romantically in love with you. And she goes, "No," which I like. I'm like, fuck yeah, girl, say no. Turn him down. Turns out and this actually introduces some weird timeline nonsense that the show doesn't talk about.
Yeah.
Her baggage is she was never able to thank the person who donated the organs that saved her life and let her live what life she had.
And it turned out to be his heart.
Turns out it was his heart. But within the context of the show, Angel and Yuri had been doing their like Battlefront Angel fight for who knows how long when main character boy wakes up. So Angel and Yuri were in that world first.
Yeah, exactly.
Which would imply that they died first, but in order for her to have gotten his organ transplant after he died, then he would have had to have died in the real world before her. So there's that bit, which is weird. But he's like, "I don't want to move on. Let's stay here forever. We can stay here forever as long as you're with me." And then she says, "I needed to tell you thank you." And she tells him thank you, and she leaves. And we have him crying to the heavens as we fade out into the intro, or the outro for the last time. And instead of people getting added to the scene, people are being removed from it until it's just him left. And that's very cool. But then he gets removed from it at the very last moment. So I'm not sure if there's weird time stuff.
Supposed to be completely ambiguous, I felt like.
Yeah, like within the context of like the programmer and everything, it kind of feels like main character was supposed to have been the programmer, but that like the timeline isn't linear.
Well, yeah.
We know that enough just by the fact that main character is the newest person to be introduced to this world.
By that logic, everyone that had ever been dead would have gone through there. So like it kind of makes sense, I guess, because these are the people that couldn't move on.
Yeah, these are the people that didn't
And so
find their
maybe
peace there.
she, for some reason, just couldn't move on for even longer. Who knows? I don't know. It's just
it's a
just
weird
not good.
implication, and in the context of like the realization about the programmer, it's implied that he's the programmer in like that last scene where he's screaming, and because we, the audience, think that he's ready to move on, and we think that from like episode 6 moving on, where he's like, I'm going to stick around to help these people, and then that'll be it for me. Well, turns out no. He was in love with her, and because of that, he wouldn't move on. It comes out super out of left field in just like the last 3 or 4 minutes, and it's not well done, and I hate it, and it's like the one part of this show that I objectively hate, that I do not think is redeemable. And then she leaves, and he's sitting there screaming to the heavens, and that's like the last scene that we see, which would imply that he's stuck because he fell in love.
But then we see him disappear.
Then the outro, we see him disappear as well. He disappeared a little bit later because it lingers on him alone for a second, but then he disappears and then the background disappears. So, like, I don't know.
I mean, it was just a meh ending. I think it should have just ended with them walking outside and then them disappearing.
Yeah.
Because that just would have been a good... Like, it just felt so pointless to add on this weird little...
Post-credit scene. There's a post-credit scene that I forgot about.
Oh, I didn't watch that.
There's a post-credit scene where after the background, after he fades and then after the background fades of the credit, we fade into a normal world cityscape.
Oh no, I did
where
see
main
that.
character is there. We can't see his eyes. His bangs are over his eyes, but it's main character. And Angel walks by humming a song that was like that was the song that Band Girl sang at the beginning of like the show that helped her move on. Main character boy recognizes it and then chases after Angel. So I guess they reincarnated. I guess that was like a hard confirm, but also they reincarnated as people who were alive at the same time. But also he's definitely still like 6'2" and she's definitely like 4'5". So like, is she just like 20 years younger than him? Is he an adult? Is she an adult? We don't know. They don't talk about it, and I don't like it.
Yeah, it was just
the last episode shits the bed.
Yeah.
Up until then, solid show. I don't like Noe. He's pointless. He's just there to go, oh, senpai, and then like be dismissive of everybody else. Most background characters aren't necessary, but they have fun moments, and I enjoy them being there. All in all, like we said, at I guess the middle of this episode, I would not add it to the list.
Yeah, same. But it was fun to watch nonetheless.
Yeah. If I'd watched it in 2010, I think I'd like it more.
Yeah. But we are at almost an hour and 20 minutes. So I feel like we could probably end it here.
Yeah.
My name is Forrest.
I've been Jack. I don't have social media. I think I have a Facebook account. But Forrest, you do cool music things.
Yeah, I do music. And you will probably have heard it as the intro to this podcast, which I am currently working on as we speak. But yeah, I go by Bustelo. You can find me on Bandcamp. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Spotify.
That's Bustelo, Bustello.
And then there is Prismship as well, which is Prismship, and that is my like dance project where I just make more upbeat music. Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.